Hello, and welcome back to the Continuing the Conversation studio. Thanks for joining us. You can join in our conversation today by commenting on our website, aieconversation.org, where you'll also find more information about continuing the conversation, or you can tweet with the hashtag AIECTCchat. I'm Elisa Greenberg, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today. CTC is preparing for our next conference, Circle Up, which will happen May 6th through 8th at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. During the conference, participants will follow conversation threads, each addressing a different topic important to the field of arts and education. Our guests today are two of our thread leaders for this conference, who will be leading that conversation in May. We welcome Nicole Agois Hurel, who will be leading our, Nicole Agois Hurel and Aysha Upchurch, both from VSA Massachusetts, who will be leading our Engaging All Learners thread. And we'll be discussing the question, what role can the arts play in creating a more inclusive learning environment? And so without further ado, I hand it over to Steve Seidel to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Elisa. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And Nicole, thank you so much for joining with us today. And you, Aysha. Nicole is, I'm not sure where Nicole is. I think she's at home, and Aysha is here in the Arts and Education office at the Harvard Graduate School of Education here with me. So our focus today is on as Elisa said, on the thread of the conference that will be focusing on inclusive educational practices. It's called Engaging All Learners. And the question that frames, the big question that frames work in that thread at the conference is this: what role can the arts play in creating more inclusive learning? So Nicole and Aysha, before we dig into the question, I want to ask the two of you to provide a little bit of context for all of us in terms of the work that you do together, because you're both working together at VSA and you work on the Cool Schools project. So give us a little bit about VSA and a little bit more about Cool Schools.
Okay. Nicole, do you want to take us first stab? It's so different. She's usually sitting next to me where you are, Steve, and so I'm like, you're not Nicole.
Nicole, want to start us off?
Sure, I'll get started, and then you can jump in. I'll tell you a little bit about VSA. So VSA is an organization. We are organized in 35 states and about 50 countries all over the world. VSA Massachusetts is a Massachusetts affiliate of VSA, and our mission is to create opportunities for people of all abilities to participate in the arts. The main program area of VSA Massachusetts is the Cool Schools program, and Cool Schools is an acronym that stands for Creative Outlook on Learning, and we've had this program with different names for about 30 years or so. And what we do is we create partnerships between teaching artists and classroom teachers who together teach in and through the arts. So they develop curriculum that both helps develop skills in the arts for students of all abilities, but also helps them learn other academic content areas and develop social skills through the arts. So we, in going back to your question, Elisa, we think about how arts learning can help students learn in a more inclusive way in the classroom. And maybe, Aysha, you want to add something to that?
Sure. So I had the pleasure of interning at VSA last year while I was a student in the program, and was excited to be able to come on board as staff. And what's really great in this work, in this intersection of arts learning and students, and not just students, but looking at everyone with different abilities and disabilities, is that the work for Cool Schools really shifts away from the student as problem, and we really are looking at capacity building for educators to engage, to, you ready for this, Eliza? Engage all learners. And I think even the phrasing of that speaks to, it shouldn't be how to get all learners to engage with teachers. So I really appreciate that the focus and the onus becomes on how do we equip arts educators, teaching artists, with a tool set to be able to engage different learner variability.
Great, great. That's really helpful. So I think you're gonna take us into the work more as we go forward. So we have this big question, and my understanding is that as the two of you were anticipating this conversation today, you thought maybe we could bring this question a little bit down to a kind of a more specific connection to particular work that you're engaged in, and some issues that you've really been grappling with that have been part of your practice now for a while. And I think that's great. I mean, I love the idea that we are going to learn more specifics about your practice and the questions that are emerging from that. So do you want to tell us the question that you decided to frame here that you can get your hands around?
Sure, kind of our access point question to bring the larger kind of provocation down was, what are the things that we can learn from inclusive education that better prepare us to be better educators? Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily abandoning the larger threat question, but it's really creating a concrete access point and looking at the flip side of it. Yep. Kind of going into this conversation of what does inclusive teaching mean to teaching? Good inclusive teaching being good teaching.
Right. So let me just say that the way that I'm hearing that question, it's in a sense it's a prior question to the thread question, which is about it's more has some specificity to the arts. But you're asking about inclusive education broadly and how that inclusive education practices make us better educators, or have the potential to do so.
Yeah, I would say so broadly, but also there's a pivot around the arts. I don't know, Nicole, if you want to.
Well, take us in there, because the arts is your space.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think so.
Your space, Nicole.
That's right. The arts is our space. So yeah, I mean, I think, going back to our program and our experience, we work with a number of teaching artists. We work with up to 2,000 students a year, ages 3 through 21, with the widest possible range of abilities that exists, essentially. And the people that are providing these programs for us are teaching artists. So when we analyze this question about what are the dispositions and strategies and skills and preparation that somebody needs in order to thrive in an inclusive learning environment, we have to think about it in the context of what our work looks like. So you have teaching artists who are coming into a classroom often once a week, often for a limited amount of time, 12 weeks, 36 weeks, who don't interact with students a whole lot and who don't know a whole lot about students before they get to work with them. Some of our teaching artists are, coming into environments in which the students need a lot of support and a lot, things need to be prepared and ready in a very specific way in order for them to thrive. So for us, as we examine this idea of, what does inclusive practice mean and what are the dispositions and the preparation that we need to put in place, we need to think about somebody, this person who's coming into this environment and needs to go immediately.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we think about a lot is this idea of learning variability is the norm, not the exception, and you need to be as prepared as possible to predict learner variability and to think about not, who are the kids that are coming into who are the kids that I'm going to be working with and what are their disabilities and how do I fix that, but instead think about your curriculum and your instruction and think about how you fix that so that that is as flexible and responsive as possible for the kids that you will encounter. And again, you won't know a whole lot about these kids, and you won't spend enough time with them to get to know all of those things. So it's about examining your practice in a way that you can have all of these things in place to address that variability and make the program as accessible as possible.
Okay, so first of all, that's just a very clear, articulate statement of sort of the fact of life for teaching artists, right?
Right.
Okay, now that you've named that, what are these dispositions and strategies and skills, and how have you identified them, and how do you make sure everybody has them before they walk in the room? Have you figured all of that out?
Do we have the Holy Grail? Yes. Check. Everybody else, we got this. I want to, before we dive into that, I want to just back up and add one more component that kind of drives our work and is a value, is that we have to also acknowledge that there are some assumptions that folks may make when they're going into said inclusive classrooms or completely separate classrooms. And we want to also be preparing teaching artists to not think, I only need to take out this toolkit when I go into this inclusive learning environment. We're really thinking about something that is transformative for your teaching practice to help teaching artists put on the mindset of an educator who's ready for any and every environment. So that is one of the things that's been key, is that it's not just about things I need to go do when I go into the special education classroom. No, it's things that you need to do
when you walk in any
when you walk into any classroom. So I just wanted to add that a little bit of kind of unpacking of some value stuff. But so yeah.
So can I just, maybe this is a question for later and we can hold it, but why would this just be for teaching artists? Why wouldn't this be for anyone spending time with children in a classroom?
I think that it is inclusive in that way. That we're definitely not saying that any of the best practices that we're uncovering and troubleshooting and workshopping with our teaching artists are just for teaching artists. We, in that sense, think that they're for any educator. Why it's particularly important is for the reasons that you mentioned and that Nicole spelled out, is that oftentimes folks who come into the teaching artist field don't often know that they're going to be teaching artists and have not, are not coming into the work with just some educator dispositions and not understanding, or do understand that they have this quick contact with these students, and we don't want them just to be the shiny object that comes into the classroom and it's okay if everything is chaotic. We want them to have something, some strategies to help them be so successful in those quick residencies or those one-offs, you know. So
would this be a good moment to sort of dig into what some strategies might be, some examples, just to give us a little grounding in what you mean?
Sure.
Yeah, so just to give you an example in the context of our work, we just went through a process this year that was developed through us receiving a grant to work with our teaching artists on an inclusion support initiative. And part of that inclusion support initiative involved the development of a tool that we would use to both spell out best practices in inclusion and also to train teaching artists and support them on making sure that they're mindful of those practices and that they're receiving the support that they need. So we created this tool. We call it the mic check because we like acronyms. It's another acronym. It's mic check. So that's right. Check your mic.
Mic check.
That's right. So it's a MICC. The M starts for materials and space. The I stands for instructional techniques. The first C stands for collaboration, and the second C stands for classroom management. So these are the...
Just do it slow again. Materials and space.
Yes.
Instructional techniques.
Okay.
Collaboration.
Yeah.
And classroom management.
And classroom management. Oh.
So So these were 4 broad areas in which we felt like we needed to identify best practices. And these all came from, all the years that we've worked with teaching artists and conversations with the teaching artists to actually develop and name these things. So under each of these categories, we have outlined a set of best practices that are relevant to our work. So from things such as that may seem pretty intuitive, like make sure that you have planned and set up and arrange your materials so that when you come into the classroom, the materials are spread quickly, kids know what to get, it's streamlined. Things that are simple like that. 2, make sure that you know who your allies are in the school where you're going, beside from the teacher you're partnering with. How about the PT and the OT, and who else are resources for you that you should be talking to? So it's a number of different dimensions, but essentially what we did with this tool was name those things, talk with the teaching artist, articulate them with the teaching artist, and say, what does that mean to you in your own practice right now? So what we do is teaching artists use this tool both as a reference, but also to articulate, I think I'm doing okay here, I think I'm doing okay here, but this is a growth area for me, and I need support. So that's where Aysha and I can identify how we target the supports that we give our teaching artists, and also think about what are the things that are coming up a lot for a lot of our teaching artists, and what else do we need to do as a staff. But I think what the interesting thing that was in the development of this tool is that when we developed it, and we came up with all this list of best practices, Aysha and I kind of had this moment where we felt a little bit like frauds, and we were saying, wait a second, are these good inclusive practices, or are these just good teaching practices, period? And we had a little moment of, oh God, is this valid? That, and I think that thinking about it and struggling with that helped us really to think about, yes, they are good teaching practices, but when you're working in spaces that have a lot of learner variability, and I'm having a really hard time thinking what spaces don't, but spaces that have a whole lot of learner variability, you have to be hyper mindful of these things, and you have to be very deliberate in the way you've thought ahead of time about these things, and they have to be in place, because otherwise it's going to be an epic failure, right? So it's not that the practices are that different, it's how we think about them as educators, or how mindful and deliberate we're about them. Is one thing that I think we've learned from this process.
Yeah. I want to add really quick another piece of context for folks, is that the where our programming happens may also be kind of the rationale why we would be developing this protocol. And it's not that our programming is just for said inclusive classrooms or gen ed classrooms or separate classrooms or sub-separate. They fall across the line. They fall across that all and always across that line. And some rooms are very, very much so set aside for students with significant disabilities. So that's another reason why we were thinking, how can we help our teaching artists be thinking ahead of, oh my God, I was not ready, and feel like a failure throughout their 10, 12, 36-week-long residency. We want to make sure that we're helping them have a good frame going into the experience, and also know that they have support. So I talked with some teachers last year, and they said the one way they feel cared for in the building is when they're getting feedback from the administration. And so this is kind of that way for us to show professional care, is we want to have this tool that's not like a report card, but it's a demonstration of us caring about how you're developing in your practice.
I was, when you were describing the tool before, I was thinking, what a great thing to have, in the history of the relationship with the teaching artist for you all, so that when the inevitable happens on a daily basis, which is that the teaching artist comes out of the room and says, oh my God, what a day I've had, and you start to say, what do you mean? What happened? What are the things that went on that don't feel, just completely right to you? You have a kind of, you can really I would guess you can sort of track back and see what wasn't in place. What did it have to do with the fact that you hadn't heard from the OT folks that there was a new student in the class who has particular issues, and that there are some things that can be really helpful to that child? Or did it have something to do with the materials, and so on? So it sounds like a really great thing. So is this tool, if I go to Tags, the local hardware store this weekend, can I get this tool?
Excuse me, do you have mic checks in stock?
when there's a tool for a cool school, is it a cool tool?
Oh, we actually have a cool tool. That's a whole other issue.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mic check. Is this something that it sounds like really wonderful work to take the time to really try to break down and clarify all of these elements in a way that can be really helpful to people. Is it available?
Is it available to the public? No, not yet. I will say this is our pilot year of it, and I think one of the great things about working at VSA is we really like to continue learning ourselves. And so Nicole and I are always like, this is revealing to us one more way we can think about this way. So we're still doing some learning about it. So no Amazon.com shopping of the mic check yet.
Or open source availability on the CTC website.
Oh, I see what you did.
We can finagle it. But I can see what you were saying is, like, sometimes it's really amazing when we do the mic checks with the teaching artists, and we go, like Aysha and I will go do an observation and use the mic check to kind of narrow down the conversations with them. And what we've been learning is that sometimes it's as simple as, I don't know what's happening, I don't know why I'm failing, and then when we really go back down and analyze this, like, did we think about this? Did we think about this? Sometimes it's something so simple that makes such a huge difference, that just the power of naming that and having conversations that are very specific has been really instrumental. And another thing we've been doing with the mic check is, after each observation, together we sit down and we say, what are 3 action steps for you? Keep in mind this, keep in mind this, keep in mind this. We'll check in a couple of weeks and see how it's going. So it's been really helpful. And another thing I wanted to add, which Aysha and I have been talking a lot about, is going back to that question about how does inclusive teaching help you prepare to be a better educator in general, is that when you're so mindful about those practices and you're so aware of them, they become second nature, I think. Like, for me, working at VSA, I've learned so much about how to etiquette for a phone conference call, how to prepare PowerPoint presentations, how to introduce myself, like little things that you learn by working in an inclusive environment that stay in your DNA and just help you be a more responsive human being, educator, human being. And so I think it's really valuable to think about this is not just for those of us who work in inclusive environments. This is a way for us to really think about good teaching in general and learn a bunch of things that are going to help us all in any setting that we're in.
Okay, so we've got really about 2 minutes.
Okay.
And I just want to bring it back to the arts for the moment and ask you whether there are, I guess the question is whether there are particular things about the fact that you work with artists, teaching artists, in a variety of settings, arts focused and more arts integration oriented. But are there things about the arts that have particularly influenced your own learning in the context of this question that you put out to us?
I will say quickly, I had a meeting with one of our school partner principals yesterday, and she just articulated so clearly and beautifully that the reason our partnership at that school is so valuable is because the demographic that she's serving is a large ELL population, and with so many other interventions to try to get literacy into the lives of these students, it still is coming in kind of one modality. So with more arts in the school, they're able to see kids expressing in a way that is just valuable for that student academically, interpersonally, socially, and I think for me, it's just kind of crystallized, not necessarily, and this is another conversation, that the arts do something, but that the arts they are everything that they are, and when they meet a need that a school is expressing, it just makes it so much more affirming for me that this work is real and it is essential.
Beautiful. Nicole, a last thought from you on this.
Yeah, I would just say, to kind of piggyback on that, to me, the process of learning, the purpose of education is to put out a challenge or a prompt or a question and allow for students to respond to that question. And when I think about both the arts and variability or disability, I think that when we ask those questions, we should provide multiple ways for students to respond. And I think the arts do that really well because they give us multiple pathways. They give us creative ways of solving problems and of coming up with solutions. And also, there's another thing I've learned from disability and from inclusive teaching is that you need those multiple responses, and I think that when you put those things together, there's so much flexibility, creativity, and flexibility that comes in the process of making art that is crucial and essential to the process of making learning environments that are responsive and that work for a variety of children. So that's kind of where I see that connection being very, very visible and real. Beautiful.
Nicole and Aysha, thank you for sharing your thought and your work. And I turn us back to Eliza.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know I learned a lot. And to everyone watching, be sure to head over to aieconversation.org to add your comments and thoughts and help us continue this conversation. We'll be back in the studio next month with a new guest, another one of our conference thread leaders for the Circle Up conference. And we hope you'll join us at Circle Up in May at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Thank you.